What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We were here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for tonight's Thursday Night Football single game showdown slate Week 6, San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. In this video, we will discuss the injuries that impact tonight's slate, and there are quite a few, low-risk lineup construction tips and core plays, and strategies, tips, picks, ideas for the largest prizes that both DraftKings and FanDuel have to offer. Before we get into it, though, make sure if you haven't already, check out the live stream I did on Monday where I talk about how I build showdown lineups, how to use our tools at Occupy to build profitable NFL showdown lineups. It's linked in the description. I put it up here in the card as well. Also, just look on our channel. It's called How to Build Showdown Lineups in 2024. Extremely beneficial. A lot of our viewers found it extremely helpful. And Universe said, you know what? It was helpful. Let's help someone out. And our Occupy member, JPT, religious viewer of the videos on our channel, shout out to JPT. We are forever appreciative of that. He watched the video, called it a masterclass, his words, not mine, but took down a chop of the showdown slate on Monday after watching that stream for 17K, 16K. So shout out to JPT. And if you haven't watched that video, make sure you go check it out after you watch this video for tonight. Now, let's get into it. Injuries, quite a few defensive injuries for both teams in this game. If we look at San Francisco's side first, defensive tackle Jordan Elliott is out. And if you just go on 49ers Twitter, all of the reporters are just beside themselves at the lack of depth that they have on the defensive line right now. So big news for Seattle's running backs with that absence. Their safety Talanoa Hufanga, he's been in and out of the lineup. He is out once again. I think he was placed on injured reserve last night as well. So that's another bump to Seattle's offense. And then Charvarius Ward, their outside corner, he's questionable, was limited in practice, but I guess the way Shanahan was talking, he is a candidate for injured reserve. So I would lean to him not playing tonight. Let's see what the reporters say, and let's see what the practice squad and roster moves are by 4 p.m. Eastern today. But if he's out, that just bumps Seattle's offense, especially the receivers and quarterbacks, even more. On the special teams side for San Francisco, Jake Moody managed to get a high ankle sprain as a kicker. So he is out. They signed Matthew Wright. He will be the kicker tonight for San Francisco, and we will certainly talk about Matthew Wright here in a little bit when we talk about strategy for tonight. On Seattle side, not to be outdone, Reek Woolen, their outside corner, he is out for tonight's game. Bumps San Francisco's wide receivers, particularly Juwan Jennings, particularly Brandon Ayuk, who is mostly an outside wide receiver. Their nose tackle, Byron Murphy, is out. Let's bump up Jordan Mason as a result. And their free safety, Julian Love, is extremely questionable. Game time decision, we'll probably know by 4 p.m. Eastern today with their practice squad elevations as well. Both defenses extremely banged up. So although it's a short week, we could see a lot of offensive fireworks in this game with both sides being decimated by injuries. All right, let's talk about low-risk contests now. 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads. You just have to beat half the field to double your money. We talked about it in Monday's video, how I build low-risk lineups using our tools at Occupy. On these videos, often we discuss how we try to get in 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, and usually we can do that on DraftKings. It's more difficult on FanDuel. We want to play any obvious values. The pricing is extremely difficult tonight, and it's a function more of who these 2 teams are rather than the DraftKings or FanDuel pricing itself. But if we try to do the strategy that we always talk about and we play, let's get both teams in here. All right, Geno, Mason, Walker, Purdy, 3,400 per player. We could actually make that work because the 2 most popular values tonight are Zach Charbonnet, running back 1B for Seattle, running back 2 for Seattle, and Noah Fant, starting tight end for Seattle. We could easily make this work. The obvious issue here is that if you do this, you're leaving out DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and JSN and Tyler Lockett versus defenses that are missing corners and secondary members. So this is the one way you can do it. The other way is to leave out one of Mason or Walker, and I think Walker is the guy that will get squeezed. Maybe it's Mason, but something like this where you play just one of these 2, and now you can play one of the receivers. Let's say you like DK Metcalf or Brandon Ayuk, whoever it is, 4,300, and then you can play one of the punts in either Charbonnet or Fant. Let's go down. And then you can play Tyler Lockett, who's going to be extremely popular on tonight's slate. I think this will be the more popular version of how people build lineups in low-risk contests on DraftKings tonight. Really, it's your preference and what you feel comfortable with. Now, on FanDuel, obviously, we cannot do this. Jordan Mason is priced as the most expensive player on the slate at 15.5. If we tried to play all 4, just 3K left per player. Obviously, we cannot do that on FanDuel. Let's clear this. And we probably want to leave one of these guys out. I would not fault you for leaving Mason out as the most expensive guy on the slate. Something like this, and then you could play, whether it's Jason Myers or Matthew Wright at kicker, then you can play a JSN or Lockett. Or if you leave out Walker, you can play a Mason. Or what I think some people might do as well, and I was playing around with the lineup builder before recording the show, you could also leave out both running backs, and now you could play multiple receivers who are a little bit underpriced in Metcalf and Ayuk here, and then you could play one of the kickers. So I think this is the probably, even though it goes against our normal strategy, this might be the better, more balanced build for these two teams. And that's a great transition into the high risk section of the show, because the pricing is dictated and makes it extremely tough to play anybody who's in our typical lower priced range because of how these teams operate. Both teams, they don't rotate in wide receiver 4s and 5s often, if ever. They barely throw the ball to their tight end 2s or tight end 3s. And they don't mix it up at running back, except for Seattle. Obviously, they get Charbonnet involved. But on San Francisco side, is really the Mason show. So when that happens, and we've seen this in years past on, let's say, the Rams showdown slates, where they run 11 personnel, they don't play backup tight ends, they give the running back one a bunch of the carries, they only throw to 3 receivers. It makes it extremely tough because there are no punt plays to get different, or that can sneak into the optimal lineup. But don't worry, we have strategies to get around that. Water sip, still not sponsored. Maybe after Monday's video. We'll see. All right, let's go back to DraftKings and let's talk about some of these high-risk strategies and angles for this slate. I'll bring up my notes here on my side. And because of this pricing, we'll actually see a little bit lower ownership on a couple places. It is Mason and Walker because they are the most expensive players on the slate, and it's not easy to jam in the studs. That they'll see lower than typical running back ownership. And again, not like 15 or 10% or anything, but 20 to 30% in the flex spots, which is pretty rare, especially for guys of their caliber. And then you also see George Kittle and Jackson Smith and Jigba. They'll get squeezed a little bit and be in that 20 to 25% range because people will either pay up for Ayuk and Debo, or they'll pay down for Lockett. Here at 5,400, Lockett's going to be extremely popular, one of the more popular flex plays on the entire slate. So you could go there, right? You could play Mason and or Walker, or you could go heavy on Kittle and or JSN here, as they'll be lower owned than their counterparts around them in the salary pool. The best way, though, to get different on tonight's slate are the kickers and defenses. We talked about low owned plays. We really don't have any. Because captain ownership is going to be so spread out tonight on DraftKings, we don't have anyone over 20% projected captain ownership, which is pretty rare. It's going to be spread out. And we only have the kickers, defenses, and then like the pure trash plays as under 20% owned, which is pretty crazy. But again, it all goes back to the dynamic of these two offenses. So we're going to have Jason Myers, 15%, 20%. He's at 5K because he's a little pricey. That makes him tougher to play. And then we have, you remember the Brandon Narvison impact in week 1 or 2 whenever Green Bay played in the showdown slate? We'll have that with Matthew right here. So yes, he's cheaper than Myers. Yes, he's on San Francisco's offense, but the field doesn't know him. They're going to be confused with Jake Moody. I've already seen industry sites fail to project Matthew Wright. They'll get there eventually. But imagine the average player, they're not going to play Matthew Wright, who has no fantasy points per game. There's 2 kickers on San Francisco. They're not going to know what to do. So he's going to be 10 to 15% owned as well, despite being a great kicker in a great environment. So honestly, I think going heavy on the kickers, specifically Matthew Wright, is a great way to go tonight in high-risk contests. And then, while it's not ideal that both of these teams have extensive defensive injuries, 49ers and Seahawks will both be 10% or less projected ownership on both sites. So certainly a way to get different if it's been rough for defenses on showdown slates so far in 2024. But if we can get just one defensive touchdown or a lower scoring game than projected, at least on one side, you have extreme differentiation with the 49ers or the Seahawks defense as well. So, and that goes for both sides. As I said, the captain ownership on both sites are going to be extremely spread out. Specifically on DraftKings, extremely spread out. We have guys ranging from 5 to 17, 18%. And I don't think any one guy will get over 20% in the largest GPP. So you can pretty much play whoever you want there and then figure out who your point of differentiation or your points of differentiation are in your flex spots. Your captain, unlike the last couple of slates, it's not like, oh, just play the lower owned captains. All these guys are technically lower owned. Some will be lower than others, obviously. But It's not a way you can get extremely different compared to past showdown slates. On FanDuel, though, we have, let's go over here really quickly. I'll show you. Geno, Purdy, and Mason are going to account for nearly all of the MVP ownership, like 70, 80, maybe 85%. To me, the easiest way, and FanDuel is a great way to play tonight, is, I mean, come on, dude. We could just play Debo, DK Metcalf, Brandon Ayuk, or George Kittle at MVP. All these guys under 10% MVP, some 5% or less. Can any of these guys score double-digit touchdowns? Can they get the 100-yard bonus on FanDuel? Yes, they can, obviously. So these guys, all fantastic MVP plays. I think it's a very clear path to fading Purdy, Geno, and Mason at MVP on FanDuel in 20 max or 150 max. Again, you want to play those guys in smaller GPPs. But in large field GPPs, the easy angle is to get way overweight on the multi-touchdown upside receivers in Debo, Metcalf, Ayuk, and potentially Kittle. So, all right, if we talk about these trash plays, I'll go through this really quickly, and then we will get out of here. If we just look at the lower owned plays or the lower price plays that are priced beneath the kickers and defense, I would just give you a couple notes about them and how they could potentially end up in the winning lineup. Let's scroll down. And again, we have Juwan Jennings, wide receiver 3. He'll be popular. It's basically Jennings, Charbonnet, and Fant. And then no one else is going to get over 5%, basically. Isaac Rindo, backup running back, not going to get more than a handful of touches. We look at last couple of games, had 5 carries 2 games ago. All right, maybe 2 points for Rindo. Cool. Pharaoh Brown, going to run 5 or 8 routes. A.J. Bronner is the most intriguing one of this group. Only ran a couple routes last week, 8 routes. Can get up to 15 routes. If you watched the primetime game a couple of games ago, I think it was against Detroit, and they talked about how the coaches really like this guy. They want to get him more involved, and he looked good, right? He passed the eye test. So he's caught all of his targets so far, all 6 targets. So we have a guy who's going to get probably at least 1 target, but if he gets 2 or 3, it's $1,600. He really opens up the slate. And again, we have him less than 10% owned, probably less than 5% owned. Can really open up. And again, do you want to play him in small field GPPs? I don't even see the downside, honestly, because it gives you a completely different construction. And even if he posts you at 0, you have a chance if your studs go off. So A.J. Bronner is probably my favorite. That's going completely overlooked on tonight's slate. Obviously, you have Kyle Juszczyk, who's been using this offense for years. He's kind of similar in that A.J. Bronner vein, where he's going to see maybe a couple targets. We've seen him when Kittle was out, obviously. In week 2, he had the targets, but could get 1 or 2 targets at his price. He could sneak into the optimal lineup. And then Jake Bobo is the other one. Only ran 2 routes last week, but ran 18 the week before against Detroit. So I guess people were just looking at last week and thinking, 1 catch, 1 target. He can get 1 or 2 targets. He's like A.J. Bronner. You're going to need to get there on limited snaps, but he's talented and can do that. So another guy you can mix into your player pool to help you fit in 1 extra stud and avoid the construction that every single other player is going to be doing tonight with Charbonnet, Jennings, or Noah Fant. After that, there's nobody else. These guys aren't going to play. Maybe Eric Saubert gets a catch at $600, but that shows you how limited these teams are. So it's really A.J. Bronner and Jake Bobo for all the money tonight. That's all we got. So, all right, guys, that'll do it for this video. Again, make sure you check out the live stream, in JPT's words, the masterclass from Monday. It's here on the channel. It's linked, 2024, how to build NFL Showdown lineups. Daily Plug will be out this afternoon, which goes through the top plays and lineup strategies and slate notes. Occupy model is already up and running with projected ownership, and our builder already loaded last night for tonight's slate, where you can build up to 300 lineups for all contest types using the rules and the strategies I talked about in Monday's video for tonight's contest. So, Brian for Occupy Fantasy, before we get out of here, just hit 9,700 subscribers. We're trying to get to 10K. Help us get there. Helps you out, let you know when we go live or upload videos. Click subscribe. It's free to do, and give us a thumbs up. So, Brian for Occupy, thank you. Good luck in tonight's 49ers and Seahawks game.